Welcome back. You're watching Nation Tonight. Nobody killed Jaahnavi Kandula. At least that's what it seems like. At least that's what King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office in Seattle wants us to believe. Because the police officer responsible for the death of the Indian student Jaahnavi in United States, Seattle, will not face any criminal charges due to lack of sufficient evidence. Remember, in January last year, 23-year-old Jaahnavi was hit by a police car being driven by Officer Kevin Dave while she was crossing the street. Dave was driving at a speed of over 119 kilometers per hour as he responded to a call regarding an overdose case. Jaahnavi was thrown over 100 feet due to the impact, and she died later that night. In September 2023, a video surfaced on social media showing another officer laughing at Jaahnavi's death. The Indian Consulate General in San Francisco had urged authorities to conduct a thorough investigation into this case. Clearly, the investigation has led to Jaahnavi's killer being freed. To talk more on this, on the broadcast, I'm joined by Parvez Memon, Senior Partner, MZM Legal LLP. Parvez Memon, good evening. Thank you very much for joining us on Mirror Now. Can I ask you first, what do you make of this verdict? I know that the courts operate on the basis of evidence, whether it's India or any other country. But when you have something like a body footage cam, having the audio of the police officer talking about how he's messed up, when you have another video mocking the death of the Indian students, how much more of an evidence does the court need to convict a person?
Well, Shreya, firstly, let us examine this from all the perspectives that are in front of us, because we are sitting here in India and we are not aware as to what evidence was presented by the prosecution in the US courts. Having said so, my heart goes out to the parents of Jaahnavi. I can feel their anguish and pain at this moment where the perpetrator of the crime has been let off by the US government. Having said so, we have to be also conscious of the fact that US is a civil law nation, whereas India and UK and other such nations are common law nations. So the law with regards to crimes, criminality, civil law are different in these jurisdictions. The fact that the person concerned here, the accused, is a police officer, the fact that he was answering to the call of his duty and rushing to the spot to save a life could be a factor that have been considered by the prosecution in his favor. It could have been weighed in his favor to the extent that it was not an intentional act, it was an accident, of course, resulting into a death of a young girl. And thereafter, adding salt to the injury was the dialogue between the two officers, which depicts their insensitivity to the crime that has been committed. Having said so, I have read the provisions of such act in the United Nations, which records that these acts of negligence, of accident, are merely a misdemeanor. They are not crime in the US jurisdiction. The maximum punishment prescribed for such offense is 90 days of imprisonment and $1,000 of fine. So in these circumstances, it was
But even
imperative
that's
on the
not done,
prosecution to
Parvez.
examine. Yes, Shreya.
Even if we go by what you're saying, the police officer hasn't even been given that 90-day punishment that you are talking about. He has
Yes,
just
so
been freed by the court.
yes, Shreya. So that happens in a case where, for example, a civilian is driving his car in a rash and negligent manner, resulting into death of somebody. That is the punishment prescribed. Having said so, I repeat that in this case, the person concerned was an officer in the line of his duty, which even in Indian courts, in Indian laws, could be an exception to the crime. So, the defenses that can be pleaded in US, there is always a procedure pre-trial. So in that pre-trial process, defense also leads evidence, the prosecution leads evidence, and the evidence is then considered by the office of prosecution to whether proceed on trial or not. Maybe there is a CCTV camera which recorded the accident. There is a camera which recorded their dialogue, which is insensitive to say the least about it. But the fact remains whether it was a crime by motive, intent, whether he purposely killed Jaahnavi all of that could have been factored, and the fact that the police vehicles are allowed to run at a particular speed. So whether we could term his rash and negligent driving as actually rash and negligent driving applicable to all civilians is a question of law that could have been answered in those courts of law.
I don't know, Parvez, what the US will term as rash and negligent when you have a whole human being killed due to that rash and negligent driving, whether it will be categorized by US law or not. But I understand your point, and I understand what you're trying to tell us, the difference of how we see the situation and how perhaps the US law will see the situation. But amid all of this, Parvez, also we have seen, and you've been mentioning it, the fact that it's, the video later that emerged of another officer mocking the death, calling Jaahnavi of limited value. And let me, in fact, actually quote what the officer said. He said, "She's just a regular person, write a check for $11,000. She was 26 anyway, had limited value." Would he have said that? Would he have mocked anybody who was not an immigrant in the United States? Perhaps that also plays in, do you think?
Absolutely
The
not.
fact that it's been
Absolutely
taken
not.
very casually, the fact this is an Indian student.
Absolutely not. This indeed, as I said, is insensitive and condemnable. But having said so, whether it amounts to an offense to be prosecuted is altogether a different consideration that we are discussing here. It is an insensitive comment to make at a death, to mock at a young life that has been lost, whether it's a brown skin or a white skin or a fair skin. You cannot mock at anybody's death in a manner it has been done. That shows the insensitivity within the police force in the US. And we have had so many of examples of similar behavior by the officers concerned. So that needs to be changed. The system needs to be sensitized. They need to be educated on human rights and the value of human life. We have seen that, how they have dealt with blacks when it is concerned to firing by a police officer on a black person, or to mock at the death of Jaahnavi and such instances. So insensitivity is there, that is condemnable, but that is altogether a different issue that cannot be pleaded in the courts of law.
Yeah. Okay, my last question to you then, Parvez, as disheartening as this may for the family of Jaahnavi and those who've been involved in her case, is there a next step that they can take? Can they move forward with this case and perhaps seek justice elsewhere?
Indeed,
Or does this
indeed.
end the case now?
No, it does not. They can appeal. They have a right to appeal. They can appoint their attorneys. They can, of course, prosecute. They can, of course, appeal against this order of the prosecution. All the avenues are open for them. But ultimately, it is for the family to weigh their pros and cons of ultimately what are they going to achieve out of it? What is the object of our pursuing this exercise? Because, as I repeat, that this act of accident in US law is not a crime. It is a misdemeanor. Further, given the fact that he was an officer doing his duty, he had not purposely, found Jaahnavi on road and said that, oh, this is an Indian girl and I should, crush her under my car. So all of those defenses would be available even at the stage of appeal. So whether the appellate court would really consider such exercise, or whether it would be an exercise in futility, that is for the family to consider, and for the government of India to, look at the options available. Indeed, in law, all the options of appeal are available, but whether to explore them or not would be something that we should look into the documents, explore what is it that we are going to achieve out of it.
All right. All right. We'll leave it there. Parvez Memon, thank you very much for joining us on Nation Tonight and helping us understand the situation better and the case better. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shreya. Thank you for having me.